we're thinking about the new book in the Shake Davis series, Havana File. And we're looking around and we find this old sort of travelogue, the kind of thing you used to see in newsreels in the theater. And I said, let's run that puppy. Let's just take a look and see if that's the Cuba that Shake Davis and Mike Stokey discover when they go on an adventure in Cuba. And, you can see plenty of waving palm trees and the majestic mountains in the background, the beaches and the walks. And you can see American tourists in their floppy aloha shirts, and they're standing around watching, talking to the people of Cuba. Yeah, maybe. But that's not really the way things are in Cuba today, let me tell you. Sure, you can see people walking around. You can see the same sort of people that we saw in that travelogue. But they're not going to be doing a lot of talking to you. And in particular, they're not going to be doing a lot of talking to you about the political situation under Castro in Cuba. You wonder why Cuba creates such a hoo-ha in America. Well, obviously, you've heard the reports. Cuba's only 90 miles from our southern coast, the southern tip of Florida. So that makes it something you want to kind of pay attention to. We've had a huge influx of Cuban refugees and that sort of thing. But take a look at this. Take a look at the map. Cuba lies right smack in the middle of three vital sea lanes. And what you want to understand about America, if you don't understand it already, is that we're a maritime nation. Our prosperity, our commerce, depends in large measure on our sea coasts, our coasts, the Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic, the Pacific. We bring things in and out, and that's vital to our commerce. And of course, Cuba lies right in the middle of the important Gulf and Atlantic sea lanes. So the person who owns Cuba, who owns some of these bastions that you see here, these overlooking, these castles and fortresses overlooking the Bay of Havana, for instance, those are very important. A person who owns those things and wanted to interfere with international shipping could do so very easily. Havana is an extraordinary seaport. And it's one of the reasons that we maintain our bastion at Guantanamo Bay to this day. Everybody thinks of Guantanamo Bay as the place where we keep captured terrorists and all that sort of thing. Sure, it's that. But it's a lot more. It is a toehold in that region, on that island, that's so crucial to America's maritime freedom of seas. And I think it's interesting when you see the tourists going in and out of buses in the travelogue and just having a great time going to Havana. Yeah, you can do that nowadays. And you can see some of the old cars that are still maintained in Cuba, the 1950s and 60s late model American automobiles that they keep around and somehow keep going, despite the fact that it's so difficult to get parts. But what you don't see is freedom among the people. Yeah, they're walking around, they're not in chains, but every place you look, there'll be somebody watching. That somebody is part and parcel of the state, the Castro regime. And that shows to me no particular chance or no sign that it's going to loosen up. The Castro regime runs that state. The military runs that state. Their biggest output in Cuba isn't cigars or sugarcane, as you see in these fields. Their biggest output is intelligence that they capture. Signals intelligence, human intelligence, electronic intelligence. They capture this stuff. And how do they get the technology to capture that stuff? Well, they get it through friendly pro-communist nations. And they use it. It becomes a huge product that brings money into Cuba. Well, that's going to change now. Tourists will be going to Cuba. And frankly, I think some of those tourists will be suborned into human intelligence agents. The Cubans are good at that. They're good at cutting sugar cane, sure, but they're not even the world's leading producer of sugar as they used to be. And so, nothing much. I don't think anything much is going to change in Cuba. That's what Shake Davis finds out in the Havana File. Regardless of any normalization of relations between the United States and Cuba, Cuba remains a communist state ruled by a dictator family in the portions of Castro. And the poor people that you see here in this travelogue, believe me, they're not just happy-go-lucky peons working in the sugarcane fields. These are oppressed people. These are people who don't have freedoms and won't get them despite our normalization. It's going to take a lot more than that for little kids like this one to grow up and understand what freedom really means. And that's the sad part of the normalization process that we have with Cuba. We're opening the doors, but we're not getting anything in return. We're not contributing to the freedom of the Cuban people, and that's the sad part. You know, the interesting part, you see these sugar cane processing mills, but what you don't see, one of the neat things that goes on in Cuba, well, neat as far as I'm concerned, is that they process a lot of rum out of this cane sugar, which essentially is the basic product when you start curing rum. And you want to be careful. If you get into Havana, this is not the Bacardi Ron Rico crapola that you get in your local liquor store. This stuff will turn you every way but loose. This is some serious juice. And the further you get out in the country in Cuba, the higher the octane. So careful with that stuff. If you travel around the world as I do, and you like the occasional good cigar, you get Cuban cigars. You can see them being hand rolled here. Despite what you see in this picture, they are not normally rolled against the thighs of a dusky virgin. They're hand rolled in factories in Havana, and they're good at it. Cuban cigars are absolutely excellent. If there is an upside to normalization of relations between the U.S. and Cuba, it's probably for us cigar fans, the fact that we can legally now get Cuban cigars.